Hey everybody, my name's Laura Belmain, your coach and guide to all things application security you can do in just 1 hour per sprint. In this video, we're going to show you where our source code tends to hang out and why it's important that we look after it, particularly the importance of access control. So before we get into the access control thing, let's have a talk about where our source code lives. Now, on the most part, the standard answer is it lives in our version control system. So whether it's GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or any of the other smaller players, or maybe you're even rocking an old school Subversion server somewhere, I hope not, but these things happen, then we have the concept that there is a dedicated place that our source code lives. However, that's not the only place that our source code lives. And I think we need to be really mindful and really transparent on this. There's other places that our source code lives that we still need to protect it. So let's start with the basics. You as an engineer, well, you probably on your first day of your job came in and they gave you a lovely shiny new laptop and you stuck some stickers on it and made it your own. And then they gave you access to the version control system and you did a checkout. Cool. Awesome. Now what that means is there is a version of that source code on your laptop. Now, that means every person on your team who has been through that process has a version of the source code. So we're not talking about just protecting the version control system then. We now also have our laptops. They've got our code in. Now, some of us, and I'm not judging, but for reasons, we share code with other people. Maybe we emailed a file, or maybe we put it on a USB stick because we needed to move it between machines. There's lots of reasons why we make these sort of decisions. Now we've got it on a USB drive or on a hard disk. We might have done some experimentation online. Maybe we uploaded bits of it into something to get a review of how many of us have gotten JSON formatting wrong and have uploaded a piece of JSON into a web tool to say, hey, tell me where my structural problems are. I do not do this often, but I have done it once or twice. So if you know you've been doing that, you've now got cause to think about code that's in the cloud somewhere else. Then you have your deployment systems. So if you're in a CI/CD, so a continuous integration, deployment environment, then your code is also living there because as part of that build, it needs to take the source code, it needs to then build it into its artifacts to deploy to your server. As you can see, our code ends up in a lot of places. And as you'll know from our previous video, we need to make sure we're protecting that for 3 reasons. The confidentiality of what is in our code and the algorithms we use and have developed to get our business model done. The integrity of our code, making sure that it hasn't been maliciously changed, that the purpose of it doesn't change, that we can trust its outcomes and decisions. And its availability, because if it's not available to us, then we could have problems if we needed to deploy it. Now, if you want an example of where this goes wrong, there was a famous breach a few years ago now where a version control platform was compromised. Now, this wasn't a personal individual account, this was the company itself. And one of the particularly malicious things that the attackers did is they took a copy of all the source code and then they deleted everything. They absolutely wrecked the place. Now, that is a big confidentiality problem. Somebody unauthorized has access to that now. And it is a big availability problem because if that was your only copy, if that's the only place you had it, then now you've got a problem. On top of this, we have to look at the types of ways an attacker might go after your source code. Now, is an attacker likely to come to your room and try and steal your laptop? Probably not for most of us. But an opportunistic thief might steal a piece of electronic equipment while you're out and about. So is that a risk to our source code? Yes, but let's go back to our previous sprint where we talked about severity. It's probably a low risk, a low likelihood. But what about we set up a new CI/CD pipeline and we were experimenting with it, but we didn't get round to configuring it properly and we've left it exposed to the internet, or we've left it with a poor quality password, or we've left an account enabled for a former team member who has now left. In those cases, an attacker might choose that actually attacking and getting into that CI/CD pipeline might be a really good way to get hold of that source code and have their desired effect or hit their motivation. So the importance of access control controls who has access to that source code in each of those locations. In our laptops, it's governed by the controls you have on your device. So whether you have a good password, whether other people share your device or your machine, whether your screen locks at the end of the day. Not particularly exciting things, but the basics. In your version control system, it comes down to the accounts you have, what repositories you have access to, and what permissions you have there. Now, a lot of teams will give out more permissions than you need, and we're going to come back to this later. So when you're reviewing access control, in the back of your mind, you kind of want to give up as much permission as you can. It's much easier to stay safe when you have very, very low permissions. When it comes to your CI/CD pipelines, you want to narrow it down even further. Do you really need everyone to have access to those pipelines? Or should it just be a few individuals? What monitoring can you turn on to make sure those accesses are treated with respect? Reviewing the access control in all of these places helps us understand how risky our source code is, how exposed it is to somebody coming and using it to either gain information that they shouldn't have, interfere with our business and its processes, or disrupt our business. So if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, please like and subscribe. Please share the 1 Hour AppSec mission with your friends and colleagues. And let's see if we can secure our source code that by the time we get to writing that amazing secure syntax, we've made it very, very difficult for our attackers to take any other path to their motivation.